Hi, I'm Steve McBride, Executive Director of Pewabic Pottery. We're excited to welcome the Decorative Arts Trust here for one of Detroit's cultural jewels. Pewabic's been making pottery and tile in Detroit since 1903, so this is our 120th year. We're going to show you around. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history and background of the pottery, and then give you a tour and show you kind of what goes on behind the scenes. We're upstairs now in our museum galleries to give you a little background of the pottery, which was founded by two people. Mary Chase Perry was the artist, and Horace Calkins was a businessman. Mary grew up in the Upper Peninsula as a young child. She became moved to the southeast Michigan as a child, became a very talented watercolorist, and then became really quite renowned as a China painter, which is basically painting overglazed enamels on pre-fired porcelain. So she found out that the kiln that she was using was invented by a guy named Horace Calkins, who was actually a dental supplier, and he developed a line of kilns to fire false teeth. And so this was something that Mary was using because it was a portable thing that she could have, and use for her own pottery. But she had some improvements she wanted to make. So she went to, met her neighbor, introduced herself. They hit it off. Horace ended up hiring Mary to travel all over the country selling kilns. And you can see up the top she's demonstrating some of the other models of these Revelation kilns. So this was just before the turn of the century, so late 1800s. She traveled all over the country, met lots of China painters and ceramic artists, came back. This was now the height of the arts and crafts movement in America. There was real interest in artists making the work from start to finish. And that appealed to Mary. She came back and said, Horace, you want to start a business? And so he said, sure. And they started the pottery. So originally started in 1903. So just for context, was founded the same year as Ford Motor Company in a little carriage house over in Brush Park, in Detroit's Brush Park neighborhood. Quickly outgrew that space and then had the building that we're currently in built in 1907. And we can take a little walk here into the early one. So we've got several galleries up here that go through the history of the pottery. This one talks a little bit about the early days, and so you can see some of the classic arts and crafts themes with nature themes and natural palettes. Here's a picture of the original stable studio on the wall. It really took off, and the thing that started Pewabic in 1903 was a big order Mary got from a company called Burley & Company, department store in Chicago, and they said, well, we love your work, here's $1,000, make whatever you want, but you really need a name, because at that point they were operating under Miss Perry's Pottery or Revelation Pottery, under the, named after the kilns. And so she put a whole list of names on the board, and ended up with Pewabic, which was thinking back kind of nostalgically to her days up in the Upper Peninsula. Her father was a physician, and one of the places that he worked was the Pewabic copper mine up in Hancock, Michigan. And so she presented some names. That one seemed to resonate the most. Burley & Company loved it. And it turned out to be really fortuitous, because Pewabic is derived from the Ojibwe. It means metallic or metal. And it really foreshadowed the thing that would put Pewabic on the map, which is our iridescent glaze. And more than anything else, Pewabic's really known for the depth of our glazes, and the iridescent glaze, which is an additional glaze and a special firing process that happens that creates like swirling metallic images. And that's really gained a lot of renown. We can walk into the glaze room and just take a look at what some of those might look like. So in this gallery, we showcase some of the early iridescent works. You can see some beautiful iridescent pottery from the early 1900s. We also have some of the materials that went into it. One of the things that we've learned over the years is definitely safety in materials. A lot of the early glazes used lead. Even we've got an orange base that's fired with the colorant, and that is uranium. So we've learned to capture a lot of the same feel, but with much safer materials. This set right here are just some recent glaze tests, but it's still a really prominent component of what we do. And so in the early years, Pewabic did a lot of vases, but one of this again was the heights of the arts and crafts movement. It was a time when there was a lot of interest in bringing art into kind of your daily life and really surrounding yourself with that. And there were a lot of architects that Mary and Horace were working with. When this was built, they reached out to one of the prominent architects at the time, William Buck Stratton, designed our studio to look like an old English inn, but it's always been a working pottery. It's one of the oldest continuously working potteries in the country. And the idea then was to like incorporate tile into your life. And so that made a big shift in kind of the work that Pewabic was doing. And we really evolved into a tile company and did a lot more tile than vases in those years, and did some major projects. And so you can see Pewabic tile across the country, from the Herald Square subway station in New York to the Nebraska State Capitol, the Shedd Aquarium. One of the biggest projects we ever did was the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. And so that's a series of a whole bunch of sacred space architecture that Pewabic has done. We've actually got one of our galleries up here is dedicated to kind of the tile making process. So this one will give you a sense of how we press tiles. We still use a traditional technique of pressing clay directly into plaster molds, and we use that even for our architectural products. And so on this wall you can see some of the range of work that Pewabic has done over the years, ranging from early work like the Guardian building downtown, the Detroit Institute of Arts. But we've if you drive around metropolitan Detroit, you'll see Pewabic all over. We're in Comerica Park and Little Caesars Arena. There's some contemporary residential projects that we've done recently. And then you'll see some examples here of some of the sacred space architecture that we're in dozens of churches in the Detroit area. There's just something that really resonates in that environment with the iridescent beauty of the depth of the glazes. So the dove on the wall here above our fireplace is actually a duplicate of one of the medallions, central medallions, one of the domes of the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Just like we do today, we used to do then, which is when we're doing a major project or doing a pressed mural, we'll create multiples in case something gets damaged in the firing or damaged in transit. And so this was laying around. This is after Mary's years, and we just installed it up on the fireplace. Mary actually ran Pewabic up until her death at the age of 94 in 1961. The pottery then was donated to Michigan State University, that ran it for about 15 years. In the late 70s, there was a recession. Michigan State University was getting ready to shut down the pottery. A group got together, formed the Pewabic Society Incorporated, and then took ownership of pottery in 1981. So we've been a 501c3 nonprofit ever since. So now we're going on a little tour of the pottery, so you can see the retail space and the working space. Right now we're in our front main retail gallery, which is all Pewabic. We make the clay from scratch on site. We make the glazes, we do all the firing, and you'll see a range of art tiles and vases and mugs, and some of our signature iridescent work. But in addition to the work that we make and produce ourselves, we also represent artists from all across North America. So in our second gallery, this is our independent artist gallery. So these are artists that have either approached us so that we like their work and said, yeah, we'd love to represent you. Some of them are actually artisans who do Pewabic work during the day and then do their own work on the side. But we carry generally around 50 to 60 different independent artists in addition to the work that we produce our own. I'm standing now in our tile showroom. So one of the main things that we do is architectural tile. And so this is where we meet with architects and designers and homeowners, and show different shapes that you can use. Different, we can show all the different glaze options that you have available to you. We've got some samples of sample fireplace, and, different things just to get people inspired. But everything we make architecturally is custom designed. So we start with a design and then we start pressing the tiles from there. So it's, continues that traditional arts and crafts handcrafted process. And you can feel the hand of the maker in everything we do. Okay, we're entering the fabrication area now. This is where we actually make the work. So this first room is our kiln room. We've got 3 production kilns, 2 that are called car kilns that roll in or out. One is more like an elevator, rides up and down on a track. But we keep these going pretty much all the time. Now we're into a part of the pottery that was added on in 1912. So the original building was built in 1907. This back portion that contains our clay mixer was added in 1912, and we still use some of the original equipment that was part of that process. So I'm standing right now in front of our 1912 clay mixer, which includes a round vat where we mix the dry ingredients with water to create a liquid slip. The slip is then stored underground. It's a paddle that stirs it to keep the liquid slip liquid, and then it goes into our filter press, which is, again, this is original equipment. We still use to make all of our tile. This was installed in 1912. The filter press is basically just a series of little plates that come together to form a hollow that's shaped like a pizza crust. And there's a hole in the middle of each one of those. And so once we put this together, we pump that liquid slip through, it expands out, fills the gap, and then the pressure squeezes the water out. After a few hours, we peel it apart, and that's how we get the clay that we use to make our tiles. So it's a process that literally has not changed in over 100 years. If you were to come in and order a fireplace for your home today, it was made in the same clay mixer that was used to do the Guardian building in downtown Detroit 100 years ago. So we're going now from where we make the clay to what we do with the clay to press the tiles. So we're doing a little bit of time traveling. So we went from 1907 to 1912, where the clay mixer is housed. We actually added on a 2,500 square foot addition in 2018. So just recently, to give ourselves more capacity, we were bustling at the seams. So this is our new Maximum Stewart Frankel-Pollock tile studio. So again, this was added in 2018 to give us more room to make our molds and press our tiles. So this is our tile pressing area. So we still do a lot of traditional hand pressing into plaster molds. And then we also have some hydraulic presses that we use for some of our higher volume. You can see Kevin is making some smaller field tiles, or field tiles right now. So even coming out of the hydraulic press requires a lot of hand work to make sure it's clean and ready to go. Right now we're standing in that glaze area. So everything that we make gets fired at least twice. So the first time the block clay dries, goes into a kiln, we fire it about 1800 degrees. It's still porous at that point. It's called bustling. It comes into our glazing area, and there's several different ways that we glaze. You can see these right now are a whole bunch of cups and drinking ware that was actually set out in the process, different phases of glazing. For these, we actually dip them into a bucket of glaze. For some of our tiles and larger vases, we'll spray them with an airbrush. And then for some of our what we call hand paints that have multiple colors on one tile, we do that with individual like squeeze bottles. And so a lot of different ways to do it. You can kind of see when you see the finished work. But that pretty much wraps up. So once the glaze, once we get it glazed, then the glaze will dry. We take it back into the kiln room. Gets fired up to about 2300 degrees to melt the glazes, and so that gives us the finished product that is delivered to our retail store. For iridescent, it actually comes back in the glaze room for another coat of glaze, and then goes into a firing process, which is a little different. During that firing, we actually inject the kiln with some dish soap and vegetable oil, and it creates an atmosphere, a very kind of cloudy atmosphere that helps create that iridescent finish. So, a lot goes into the work. That pretty much wraps up our tour. We really appreciate, the Decorative Arts Trust coming and checking out Pewabic. We invite people to visit us online, www.pewabic.org. You can shop, check out a little bit more of our history, and see some of the work that we make. And if you're in Detroit, make sure you stop by and visit our National Store landmark.